The supply route into Eritrea must be one of the most difficult and dangerous in the world. Convoys of trucks, like this one carrying American wheat, make the 200-mile journey and rarely get out of second gear. They start among the blowing sands of the desert before climbing up dry river beds through mountains which rise to 8,000 feet. As the Eritrean border approaches, the Kalashnikov rifles appear. The war, which I'd only read about, began to seem very real indeed. As the trucks move deeper into Eritrea, the danger of daylight bombing will slow their progress even more. Back in England, I'd assumed, naively as it turns out, that once the wheat got to Port Sudan, its journey would be over. But in fact, the journey from Port Sudan to the Eritrean border alone takes 24 hours, and it can be done in daylight. Once you get inside Eritrea, of course, it's a different story altogether. You've got to travel at night, averaging no more than 5 miles an hour. The roads are terrible, the lorries overloaded, and the wear and tear must be enormous. It all goes to show how desperately they need this wheat. My own transport, provided by the Eritrean Relief Association, or ERA, was a bit faster, but a great deal less comfortable. The journey from Port Sudan to the EPLF base camp would still take 12 hours, so we pressed on through the African night to get there by dawn. Next morning, I expected to find myself in a small town full of activity. Instead, I was in a seemingly deserted mountain valley. Because of the bombing, Eritrea is under a daytime curfew. Everything is camouflaged. At first light, even the telltale tracks left by our nighttime arrival were scratched out. The jeep itself was hidden under a tree, some sacking tied over the windscreen to prevent reflections. I was staying in a well-concealed guest house built into the side of a mountain. Out on the veranda, 2 of ERA's staff joined me to help map out the rest of my route. Now, where's Tessenay?
Tessenay is near the border in the Sudan. It's when you reach Zara, then you can go to...
ERA has offices around the world to promote the Eritrean cause and collect money for food and medical aid. Women are especially prominent in the organization, as they are in all aspects of Eritrean life.
Well, it depends. Yes, you can live...
Askalu is responsible for food distribution within the country, while Gebre Mikhail helps organize the transport. With last night's journey still in mind, I wondered about his problems.
It's very expensive, and that is one of the areas that we badly need assistance. You see, this is an emergency situation, and our logistical capacity is so limited that we need to reinforce our fleet of trucks. And because it's an emergency situation, that we need to get things at the right time and in the right quantity. So we really need assistance in this area.
Are you saying you want trucks more than food?
No, but we equally need, food and trucks. Because without the trucks, even if you give us food, given our present capacity, we will not be able to reach, the hundreds of thousands of people who are in dire need,
Before setting out up country where the wheat was going, I wanted to locate the EPLF's hidden base camp, especially the hospital, about which I'd heard so much. Eventually, my eye began to pick out landscape features which didn't look quite right. When I was brought here first thing this morning and told that this was the main hospital in Eritrea, I thought it was some form of elaborate practical joke, because to me it looks just like a dried-out river valley in some rugged, if pretty spectacular countryside. But the closer you look, you begin to see little doors like the one I've just come out of. That's where they store all the drugs they use here. And further down this 3.5-mile valley, you find all the departments you'd expect in a big hospital: orthopedic, cardiovascular, and all the other ones, complete, of course, with a full-blown operating theatre. So what looks like just a valley with its wandering camels and goats and nomads is, in fact, a 1,200-bed hospital. Trees were the clue. Under every clump, there'd be a makeshift ward sheltering a few patients. The hospital has 12 qualified doctors, and one of them, Dr. Mikhail, led me into the cardiovascular unit, tucked into the side of a mountain. Here I was given my first awful glimpse of the reality of war.
We have here is a fighter, and he stepped on a landmine, and he sustained a very bad injury.
Yes.
He has an amputation of the left leg and abdominal injury. He also has some amputation of the fingers too.
But most of the patients were not fighters. A few days earlier, 4 Ethiopian MiGs had spotted something moving on the ground and dropped 14 cluster bombs. Their target turned out to have been a school. 3 children were killed and 13 injured.
She's about she's 15 years old.
Yes.
And she sustained a chest injury as well as fracture of the humerus. And we put this airplane cast because the fracture was very high at the head of the humerus. And this is the way you treat them. Come here, Lahi. Hold on, Lahi.
These children seem pretty brave, Doctor.
They are brave because they are among the fighters, and this one sustained an injury on his elbow region, quite a bad one. Actually, the arm was dangling, and the arteries, the nerves, they were all cut. He has a very bad fracture. And because he came in a very short time after his injury, we were able to save his arm. We repaired the arteries, and we connected the muscles, the bone, and his hand, we managed to save the arm.
So he'll be able to use his arm again?
Yes.
It seemed remarkable that sophisticated operations like these could be performed under such conditions. Can you tell him from us how brave we think he is, please? Even so, there's a desperate shortage of drugs and medicines. All these children had to relieve their pain was aspirin. Another problem which makes the patient's recovery slower than it should be is simply lack of food. The basic diet is lentils and bread made from sorghum, or dura as it's called locally. There's no fruit, no vegetables, no milk, and hardly any meat. Scurvy and anemia are rampant.